Hey everyone, this is the first kind of prototype of a dev call, a Bisq dev call that we're thinking about doing in some sort of regularity, whether it's once a month or every couple of weeks or something like that. So first time around, we're just playing with format. So a lot of this will just be asking you for your feedback if you think this is useful. But basically what we have in mind, we've been doing these growth calls regularly, and that's kind of about how to help Bisq grow, and that's something that a lot of people can participate in. But really, what our major limiting factor is developers. There's really just a small group of people, just a few people really, that are regularly developing on Bisq and building features and things like that. So the idea of this call, the primary goal, is to just raise to the surface all of the potentially interesting things that can be done that there's just no bandwidth for, so that at least people have a quick resource that they can go to, like this call, and we'll do show notes with links to stuff so that it's that much easier for people to discover what can be done. If you're somebody who's interested in building on Bitcoin, Bisq is a great place to be because it's built on Bitcoin, right? So there's like a lot of potentially interesting work to do, and we thought we'd just each of us, Manfred, Christoph, and myself, just make a quick list and go through that list just to mention things, and we'll see how much time we have at the end of the call. We're going to try to keep it to 45 minutes, and depending on how quickly we can just get through mentioning each of these things, we'll decide if we want to talk in a bit more depth about something. And in the future, if we have more people on these calls, we can do Q&A and stuff like that. But let's give it a shot. I'll share my screen. 1 second. Okay, so you guys can see? Yeah, cool. So this is actually not in any particular order, since it's just the first time around. There's just a number of things that I wanted to mention. This is in no way a complete list, and it's intentionally not a complete list. It's really like, hey, here's the stuff that's on my mind personally, of what I think is interesting or important. And you'll see the same thing in Manfred and Christoph's list. And in the future, if other people join, they would come with their own list. So there's nothing official or authoritative here, right? So I'm just going to go through this very quickly. The first one is simplifying our repository structure, streamlining the process. We broke up the repository some months ago. It's turning into be just too much of a hassle. So this is kind of an internal-facing thing. It's mostly on me. This is probably what I'll focus on soon. But the upshot for developers is we're finding the sweet spot in terms of just ease of use with the build and flexibility and stuff like that. So it's not too terrible at the moment, but it'll get even better over the next weeks. Second thing is what I wrote is consolidating our multiple binaries and node types under a single Bisq-D. And this is something that even the three of us haven't talked about too much, but it's dawned on me, and this is related to the repository restructuring and stuff like that, is I think a lot of the things we have, like seed node and stats node particularly, I think it's possible that we can operate these all under a single Bisq daemon that we produce from the single repository. We did a lot of work to make Bisq, operatable in a headless way recently over the last months. So you don't have to have the UI around and so on. And now that we've done that, I think it's actually a matter of better command line options and things like that to be able to run Bisq. A Bisq daemon as a seed node, as what we call a stats node, which is used for our market API, and so on, so that we're not constantly in the business of going and updating all these kind of little micro binaries all over the place. Larger topic, if we want to get into it later, we can, but this is something that I think a lot about, so this is why I'm mentioning it. Related to that is building a proper RPC API for Bisq, right? When we're running Bisq headlessly, you want to build bots against it and things like that. We've had some API efforts going on. They're still ongoing. We've had some prototypes with gRPC. We know this is the right thing to do in the ecosystem. Super inspiring to see what Lightning has done with gRPC. Bitcoin's RPC interface, right? We want to have Bisq feel right at home, at that kind of systems level infrastructure, right? Sort of forget about Bisq the application, Bisq the UI. It's been very centric around that. We've always focused on that. Now we want to sort of start thinking systems level, interacting with a headless Bisq node and all the things that you can do with that. So, we want great APIs for that. And that's one more thing to do that I'd really love to do myself. But, we need people that are skilled with that. Docs is something I've been focused on a lot lately. And, I'm right in the middle now of, considering, just realigning priorities and making sure that I'm working on the most effective thing that I can. Did a lot of work to document the roles process, and now I hope to have people own their own kind of role documents and so on. Won't go into any more depth about that, but I'm looking at handing that stuff off to the role owners and saying, okay, what's the next most important thing for me to do? Visual design refresh is something that's been on our plate for a few months now, ever since Pedro dropped this excellent kind of a PDF design spec to refresh Bisq's visual design and brand. Christoph is going to begin working on that in the Bisq UI, I think, first. And there's the website that needs to be done as well. So again, not going into any depth, but there is kind of a major design refresh in the works for Bisq, which is pretty exciting. Always worth mentioning, right? SegWit support is one of the things people ask the most about. SegWit support in Bisq. We don't have it because BitcoinJ doesn't have it. We're sort of sick of having that conversation. So either we need somebody to show up and really own our fork of BitcoinJ, own interacting with the BitcoinJ community, getting the stuff that's in our fork merged back into BitcoinJ proper, or really owning that we have an independent fork, or not using BitcoinJ anymore, right? Even more sort of radical stuff. And I have neutrino integration down here, Bitcoin Core integration, right? We have a few different ideas about how to do it, but we're really hampered right now, I think, just more so over time by our inability to get certain things done because they're not coming online fast enough or maybe ever in BitcoinJ. So something needs to be done, but again, there's just a few people doing it right now. So it really bears repeating that this stuff is really important. And it's not exactly low-hanging fruit, but it's definitely meaty, juicy work for somebody who's already got some skills and talents and want to apply that to a project that matters in the space, right? Bisq Remote for Android is how I sort of have dubbed this effort. I think that's a fair working title for the Android, or sorry, for iPhone actually. What am I talking about? Not for Android, but for iPhone.
May I interrupt quickly? As it's proposed,
both, yeah.
Yeah, it's our Android version. I think it's closely to get finished also, and the iPhone is already close.
Okay. Joachim is doing both in parallel.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can give you a little bit an update afterwards.
Yeah, great. But in any case, right, we do have a mobile app for Bisq that really acts. Just mental model is that it's a remote control for your running Bisq node, right? And we can get into more about that, I'm sure. It's on other people's lists. BSQ, right, and what we've been, planning and building and rolling out now for the last 8-9 months, right? The overall Bisq DAO and the mechanisms, the technical mechanisms that support it, the BSQ token and the system, the consensus mechanism that powers all of that. Huge topic, tons of development, literally years of work, coming to a culmination now. We need testing, we need, there's plenty of polish to put on the thing, I'm sure, but that's coming together. I'll let Manfred talk more about that. And here this should probably be higher in the list, is fixing failed trades caused by non-broadcast Bitcoin transactions. So that's like kind of inside baseball. I won't go into the details about that, but we do have occasionally failed trades on Bisq, and that's of course an inconvenience for everybody, and it causes us to do reimbursements for lost fees, and it's a kind of a pain in the ass in the arbitration workflow and so on. And it's the kind of day-to-day work that really makes a difference to get done for somebody who's familiar with Bisq, familiar with Bitcoin J, et cetera. Manfred does a lot of this kind of bug fixing, and this one hasn't been fully fixed yet. We've been patching things up over the months, but it's just a good example of the kind of real work that's out there to be done. And a couple of kind of high level items, nothing really specific, but people doing research on what it would mean, what it could look like, what possible paths are for Lightning integration for Bisq, just like blue sky thinking, with people who are closely following Lightning Network development, care a lot about Bitcoin, are interested in what Bisq is trying to do. It would be so great to have that kind of energy and interest and proposals and things like that, and people that are capable of really owning that work. We've got other fires going on right now, but we're interested. We love that, right? Coin mixing integration research, right? Again, just to mention it, all of this stuff is possible. This can become so many things. It can become very sophisticated, but it takes people to do it, right? Neutrino integration, I already mentioned. A good one I just saw the other day, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but BIP 174 is partially signed Bitcoin transactions, which I had no idea that work was going on, but it's basically a formalization of the kind of thing that Bisq builds in. We do partially signed transactions in Bisq just for efficiency purposes and so on. Exactly when transactions get broadcast and signed is all a particular function of the way Bisq is implemented right now. But there are commonalities, and BIP 174 standardizes some workflows and some terminology, and I think introduces things at the protocol level to help with this. And it's the kind of thing that would just be such interesting work for somebody who's already really knows their way around Bitcoin, is interested in Bisq, is an aspiring, protocol developer, and says, okay, I'm going to take what Bisq has done and essentially proprietary is the wrong word, but implementation in a specific way, right, with partially signed transactions, and I'm going to research and see how can we adapt this to this new BIP, right? Would be super interesting. So yeah, also just having people around who notice things like these BIPs and even bring up these ideas is something that I think we often miss. Another one probably for me, I guess this would be by default, is constantly thinking about ways to tell our story better, to get it out there, what we're actually doing. A lot of people still don't know what Bisq is, and most people don't have a kind of vision of Bisq as, like Bisq grows up to be a full-blown foreign exchange layer for the Bitcoin ecosystem, right? Bisq is kind of like just another DEX or something like that in most people's minds, but it's certainly not the way that I think about it, right? I think if you've got a properly decentralized Bitcoin to fiat exchange mechanism out there, you probably don't need 1,000 of them, and I think Bisq can become that layer, but it needs continued development, continued work, right? And I'd really love to be able to express that kind of vision and incorporate in, a lot of the things that we're talking about here, and give some kind of idea of the shape of the, a Bisq that could be, right? So I'm always thinking about how to do it. I'm not exactly sure, but that's one of the things that I think about prioritizing. And then, and this is something that, mainly I want to talk with the two of you about. It's not necessarily so interesting for every potential developer, but, well, I guess it is, right? It's just, I want to consider doing date-driven releases of Bisq desktop, basically. We sort of do this roughly once every month or two, but the main reason I want to consider it is to see about aligning compensation requests and all the work that we do toward our compensation requests and releases being out the door that deliver that work. And, obviously you two know what I mean when I talk about delivered work and our compensation requests. It's a little bit of inside baseball for people who aren't familiar with that yet. But it's, again, just another thing on my mind. So I wanted to put it on the list. Okay, that's it for me.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Maybe I take over then the next.
Yeah.
But should I make the screen sharing, or can you do it?
I'm happy to keep my screen shared if you like.
Perfect.
Although, I guess you should do it, because when you talk, your screen will take over. So I'll stop and you can share your screen.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sure there's some way to do that. But
yeah.
But in other ways, as a Chris, you can also force your screen to everyone. So even if Manfred is talking, it will be visible. But yeah, don't worry.
I don't mind. I have nearly. Should I start it?
Cool, we can see it.
Yeah, that's all right. Okay. I try to keep it short, and please stop me when I get lost in the details or whatever. Yeah, from my side, the priority is we need more devs, and unfortunately, at the moment, I mean, it's great that we have a lot of new contributors in many areas, but unfortunately, there are not too many dev contributors, and we have seen it in the last compensation requests that actually the compensation requests for dev work were from the numbers, also from the amount, not from the requested BSQ, but from the number of contributions were lower, like other requests, which is all important, of course, like the community support and writing documents and all kind of stuff. And I'm super happy that more and more people are joining. It's just a balance for me. It's not in a good balance. I think we have to actively focus to find more devs, and I mean this call is one of the attempts to get there. The build system, Chris already talked about. I think it would make development a little bit easier when we go back to a mono-repo structure where we have the main projects, which are usually always connected together when they're actually living in one repository. The dev updates, the mobile app is nearly done. It's not, I mean, there are some stages planned. The first stage is it's a pure notification application. So it's only one directional. You receive notifications from the Bisq application to your mobile app to protect your privacy. There is a relay server in between. So you are sending an HTTP message to the relay server with the notification, which is encrypted. And the relay server forwards this message to Apple or Google infrastructure, and you receive it then on your mobile app. At the very beginning, you have to make a pairing with your mobile app to your Bisq application. So the mobile app is creating the encryption key and passes over the mobile ID, the token, to the Bisq application, and then the Bisq application is using this for the notifications. For people who are super concerned about privacy, they probably will not use it because there is some privacy weaknesses that Apple learns that you are using a Bisq application and you're receiving some notifications. They don't learn about the content. And the relay node, which will be operated by probably by Joachim, who is doing their mobile development, he could theoretically learn the matching between, no, actually not really. Yeah, he just sees that there are some, the identity of the mobile app. So it's not perfect, and there will be, maybe in the second version, there will be a perfect solution for privacy. The plan for a second version will be, which will be a bidirectional, where you can really remote control your Bisq application from your mobile. The plan is to have there a Tor layer, the same way like we use it in Bisq. For Android, that works for sure. For Apple, for iOS, it's not 100% clear if it's doable, if it's feasible. But in the worst case, we will only release it on Android. And that's not planned for the first release. So the first release is just a pure mobile notification service, and that's hopefully get shipped in the next 1 or 2 months. Yeah, yesterday I just added a pull request for face-to-face trading. I think it's it was often requested, and I hope that some developer pick it up. But as it didn't happen, I did it myself now, and hopefully in the next release that will get shipped as well. It will be a very simple, basic version, and we will test out if there's real interested and enough volume, because of course it's harder to have the restriction with the local place. There will be less offers and so on. So it's an open question if it really will work out in practice, but we want to give it a push. I also would like to get in another interesting payment method, Hellcash, which allows quite privacy protecting trading. It's not available in many countries, but in Spain and some other European countries. Yeah, on the DAO, there is a lot of updates as I'm getting close to the final state. Yeah, I'm trying to get the UI now more or less complete, and the rough plan for the launch is end of August, probably, that we are launching on testnet. And yeah, there's still a few questions. For instance, if the bonding will be enabled or not. There's all the features which the DAO should have, like the bonding and parameter change, that you can request the change of the parameter, like changing the trading fee or whatever. That's all implemented and working. We will just, for the first launch, we will deactivate the most of those features, just for security reasons, that we have more time to write more tests and test it better before we are activating it. So we will launch only with the most important features. I would like to get a little bit more update, and I have asked just Bernard on Slack if there are updates with their API work. He didn't respond yet, so I don't know any updates. Hopefully, I would really like to prioritize the API work, because I think that's really important to get us to the next level for volume. I think the API will push a lot, hopefully, the trading volume. The growth calls format, I would like to get a little bit more weight on development-centric stuff. So maybe a good idea would be to alterate, to have a 2-week cycle of the growth calls, and the dev, 1 week growth call, 1 week a dev call, and then to repeat this every 2 weeks. But yeah, still can discuss how to do this. And I would like to get a little bit more users into the growth calls, so that we started last week already, and there was one contributor offering to be a guest there, and to get a little bit more into discussions with users, their problems, feedback, whatever. Regarding the DAO voting, I had the feeling from myself that when we get more and more requests, especially when people are working on very different areas, like some are working only on development, some are working maybe on the docs part, it's quite time consuming to really validate the work of these contributors. You really have to go over all the commits and the content, and I think that doesn't scale well when every voter or every contributor should validate all the work from all the other contributors. And I think the natural way will be that those who work together, like the other developers with whom I'm working, I know very well the value of their contribution. And then I think it's better that the standard recommendation is to not vote when you are not really, when you don't have the time, you don't want to take the time to really make really a solid proof of the contribution. And by that, when less people are voting on some requests, the ones who will do the vote, because they're working really with the contributor, they automatically get a higher weight, and it's a kind of like a natural delegation system. I mean, to build a real delegation system is on the long-term roadmap for the DAO as well, so that you can say, okay, I don't know what's going on the docs, but I know Chris is working on this with some people, and I give my vote for the docs to, or for this vote on this contributor who has done something on the docs area, I give my vote to Chris. So Chris has basically more weight like normally. But I think by just when I say I don't know what's happening and I don't have time to really evaluate this, I don't vote at all. And then maybe Chris is the only one who will vote, or maybe 2 or 3 other guys as well. And then their vote automatically will have more weight. So I think that would be kind of like the easy way to deal with this. But of course, that's up to discussion. And,
yeah, can I just jump in real quick on this? I'm very, very glad you wrote this down. I constantly think about this delegation problem. We're running right toward a brick wall, right? We can't do this. Like, it works okay right now. You have 10 people do contribution requests a month. You have 10 people do voting. But I feel how inefficient that's going to become. You could, and we all predicted it, right? But we're getting right at that threshold. So I think about, delegative, liquid democracy style stuff all the time. And it's like, pie in the sky. It's not going to happen for months. So this is super elegant. I really like what you're suggesting here. And I would just tweak it a little bit. I wouldn't say don't vote, but rather vote 0, right? It's 1, 0, or -1 in the spreadsheet. So everybody should vote, by default, vote 0. And I think that's also just healthy for a bunch of reasons. I think there's a fair amount of rubber stamping that goes on, right? I know not everybody reads everybody's stuff every time, and it's for these reasons of efficiency. I get it, but by actually voting 1, I think what that starts to say is, I did my homework. I read the links. I assessed this work, and I'm giving it a +1 or a -1, right? Because I feel strongly about it. So I'm just 100% behind this, and it's something we can do straight away. So that's beautiful.
I think I will add something in the UI then for voting, that when you vote, then basically you get some note or whatever. You only should vote when you really know, and when you have really made the work to prove the request, and otherwise you are basically creating a damage for the DAO, because otherwise the vote has no much value. And it's better that there is only 1 or 2 voters. I mean, it's open, everybody can be in this role, but we get a better result, and especially for development. I think it's really difficult, like our SQ who works with me with the DAO. I mean, I'm basically the only one who can validate his work, because otherwise, of course, you as a developer, you can do it, but it takes a lot of time. You have to read all of the commits, and probably you don't have the time to do this.
Well, now, so we should move on. But I want to say something about that, but we should move on. Okay.
Okay, we can discuss later. I mean, there's a lot more to discuss about the DAO, about the way how we manage it at the moment. I think it works pretty good, but maybe we need to tweak here and there, and maybe we can make one session which is focused on this, because it's probably too much for such an overview session like today. Yes, the plan is to launch, or I hope that I could even launch it with end of July, so we can do the next voting in parallel maybe, or just on the testnet version. But I think it's not realistically that I get it done, and I'm traveling end of July also. So end of August, I'm pretty sure that the testnet will be out. I would like, and I've observed that there are a little bit different ideas what the DAO is really about, and what my personal idea is. And of course, there is an overlap, and it's totally fine when people have a different focus what they understand under DAO. But I think it requires that we write more about this, the mental ideas, the mental model about the DAO, why we want to build a DAO. And my main focus is that the human element is in the center. And I see my problem with many of, not many, but with some of the comments on Twitter or whatever. I see that some people are seeing a DAO as completely automated and getting rid of the human influence and the subjectivity of the humans, and make everything automated by code. I'm completely against, or I mean, of course, that's part of it. We want to automate the stuff with, where humans are not required. But I think the really important part, like this judgment, if a contribution is valid or not, I'm convinced that this cannot be automated in a meaningful way, especially for important work like development or anything which has real quality. And I think to bring the human element in the right balance and to build the right incentive structure for the whole DAO, that people are coming together and creating value and have a token which is representing the value. That's for me the core of the DAO, but getting lost in anything. But I would like to maybe we need to write an article about this and get these ideas a little bit more out. And that goes also, people are frequently asking about the roadmap. We have on the web page a roadmap, but it's not well maintained and doesn't contain basically much of all these ideas what we have. So probably it would be good either to really update the existing roadmap or create a different format for this or whatever. But to have some place where we see what we have midterm, long-term on our plan, on our list. And that goes also, yeah, what you mentioned with the vision of Bisq, what Bisq can be in future. It's much, much more like this exchange like it is now. It's basically a platform. And we see with the DAO that you can build the DAO on top of this existing infrastructure. It's a very good sign that it's a working platform with the peer network and everything. And I see that there are frequently repeating discussed topics like atomic swap, lightning, and so on. And I think it would be efficient to have one document where, like a FAQ, where we are just giving the answers, because it's a little bit time-consuming to always repeat the stuff, and it's somewhere hidden in the forum or whatever. And would be probably good to have this more collected. And another topic which I think we should spend a little bit more time on are stablecoins. I mean, the dependency that banks needed and required for normal Bisq trades, I think it's one of the biggest weaknesses in Bisq. And face-to-face trade is already one attempt to get rid of the banks. But I fear that's limited to those people who are living in areas where other Bitcoin users are. And we'll see how it will scale and how much it will be used, but I don't have too much expectations. And I've thought all the time about alternatives, and basically there are no real alternatives to the banks. And I think stablecoins, where you, at least for the speculative part, where you replace the fiat currency by another cryptocurrency, either by some existing ones like Tether or BitUS dollar or whatever. And that's, of course, not an endorsement for those projects, because some are rather shady. Or to implement their own stablecoin. I had some ideas for this, which is not planned at all at the moment, but at least interesting to see that it could maybe work. I think that would give us a lot of independence from banks. So those people who want to speculate mainly and not want to really get the fiat out or in, those have an alternative, a privacy protecting alternative to the normal bank transfers. So I think we should focus a little bit on this and try to, I mean, to just add such a stablecoin is no effort at all. We had it in the past, but it was not traded. But maybe I have to think a little bit more in this direction. Sorry, it was already long like I expected.
Not too long for sure.
No, it's pretty. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, and yeah, now I have a super short list at least. Yeah, Manfred, can you keep the slide open? Yeah, I don't want to repeat too much, so I just added the most important points for myself. So regarding dev work, I'm pretty excited that I'm able to start now with the redesign of the client based on Pedro's design concept. We'll also do not only just from a graphical design change, but also we'll introduce some more kind of animated UI components that are based on the Google Material Design language, basically. So that should be done, hopefully, end of the month for sure, for the next release. What also came up as I did the first release with 071, that we saw in July, or we will see in July, that the volume decreased a little bit, or so, and I wasn't sure if it's based on the new update or if we have any issues. And at the moment, it's really hard to tell if the problem is based on a certain version of a certain feature. So I will always also try to work on a proposal. I started very, very early in the beginning already to have a privacy-aware kind of client analytics. So we can see more easily and quickly what features help to increase volume, and if we have a problem with a certain feature or a certain change. For example, if we launched a redesign, maybe completely it might be more mainstream for sure, but maybe it has a negative effect on our core audience, and it's a bad idea. But yeah, in the end, it will be really hard to tell if we don't have any analytics in place. Yeah, so that's from my side. So I'm up for any discussion on all the other points. Chris, how do we want to do it?
Yeah, well, I think we started about a quarter after, so we're getting on 45 minutes anyway. I think it would be a good idea to keep the call to that length, just to try, so that people know it's that length and they can take the time out for it. But maybe is there just one item that we want to talk for five minutes on? I'm just scrolling through as well.
I mean, I could give a little bit an update about the Lightning stuff. I was at a conference in Lisbon, and Lightning, of course, was the main topic. And I talked with some developers.
This was building on Bitcoin, right?
Yeah. And the main problem to use Lightning for the current trade protocol is the requirement for multisig. And I asked some developers if multisig could be possible on Lightning, and there is some theoretical way how it could work, basically to have multiple commitments, and those commitments get then shared and so on, but that's not implemented, and there's no roadmap when and if that will ever be implemented, and a normal Bitcoin multisig is not possible, as far as I heard from people. So I think Lightning integration for the trade protocol is probably not realistic in the next 2 years, I would say. But luckily, we have another alternative to use Bisq and bonding of Bisq as a replacement for the current, or an alternative to the current on-chain trade protocol, which will allow then completely off-chain transactions. That's maybe a topic which would require a little bit write down, and maybe I'll make a proposal one day for this. It's also for mid-term or long-term, but I think that's even more interesting, or similar interesting approach like Lightning. Yeah. And hopefully in the next 2 years, the mining fees will be still not so bad that it will kill the on-chain trade protocol, and we still have time to get
well, I mean, hopefully whatever, whether it's a multi-sig per se or some kind of equivalent technique for doing trustless escrow in Lightning, transactions, that development is probably going to ramp up in proportion to transaction fees, right? The less you can do Bitcoin multi-sig transactions, the more pressure there is to figure out how to do it on the second layer, how to do something equivalent to it. It's kind of like what we saw with consolidation and just all the efficiencies around batch transactions and things like that. Today, thanks to the price transaction fee spikes from last year and stuff. So fingers crossed. But yeah, and when I bring up Lightning in my context, I mean, yeah, the sort of most obvious thing is like how could we migrate or support in parallel the Bisq's trade protocol on Lightning, and yeah, maybe it can, maybe it can't, or maybe it's a far in the future thing. But it's also for me like, well, what else might be possible? Like I pay attention to all the news and stuff like that, but I don't have my hands on Lightning. So, what would somebody who's really paying close attention, really thinking about Lightning and using it on a daily basis, if they knew Bisq as well as they knew Lightning, what would happen when they think, right? Like what ideas that maybe we haven't had yet would they have about potential integration? So on. I never get over the fact that Bisq users run a long-running client, right? And there's overlap between, you need to have a long-running client, and if you're going to run a Lightning node too, right? Yeah, maybe there's nothing there. Maybe there's no integration to be had, but I always want to kind of keep it open. It seems like there's some possibilities.
if and when running a Lightning node become financially interesting, so that with the fees you're earning some money, I think that could be just an additional feature, because we want to get rid of Bitcoin J anyway, so either by using Neutrino or using Bitcoin Core, and probably those new this new technology where we move over the Bitcoin part will be have by default support for Lightning, hopefully. So it shouldn't be too hard when we have this infrastructure in place to run a Lightning node, even if it's not used for the trading protocol. You can use it maybe just as a kind of like a secondary wallet where you do Lightning transactions, and use it as a node where you earn some trading fee on the side and add some economic incentives to keep this open. So that's for sure interesting. And maybe there are really some alternative trade protocols. And there have been some discussions for smart contracts on Lightning. I have not watched it yet, and have not read more about it. But I mean, there are for sure more people who are interested to get more at the end smart contracts on Lightning. And there's super much activity there. So who knows? Maybe somebody come up with an interesting alternative to the current Bisq trade protocol. I just think that the current Bisq trade protocol cannot be ported to Lightning from my current understanding. But who knows? I'm not an expert on this, and who knows what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Which is just why I want to keep bringing it up, so that people who might have that spark have the opportunity. But so we should go. These are probably over time now. But maybe the last thing is just if this makes sense, Manfred, like for people who want to install Bisq Remote and so on. Actually, I would love to. I still haven't done it. So like, where should they go? I'm not sure. Are there instructions anywhere?
Not really instructions. I'm basically the only tester at the moment for Joachim. All the Java code, also the Bisq, and this relay server are on my repository, so Manfred Clara and Bisq relay, or then all the main applications with the notification branch are the version what you need, and the mobile app you have to install on the iOS, how it's called, Test Flight. That's an application where you get the developer version. I'm not sure if you can. Maybe you need some invitation from Joachim or whatever, but best to get in contact.
Joachim needs to have your device identifier so you're able to install it on your device.
Okay. And you have it installed, Christoph?
I haven't installed it yet. No.
Okay, so let me just ask it this way, right? Like, if people are watching this and they're interested in that project and they want to try it out, is it a good time for them to ping us about it? And okay, we can write down a few instructions, or do you actually not want that attention right now?
It's maybe so Joachim is on holiday for the next 3 weeks, so maybe it's not the best time to disturb him too much when he comes back. And so we want to run the relay node on the server anyway, and maybe make the first release directly, even if it's not a public release, and then it's much easier. People just go to the App Store and install it. The Android version is not complete yet, but when he comes back, probably in 1 week or so, I assume will be complete as well. And then it just needs a little bit more testing, fine-tuning on the Bisq side. The integration is nearly done. There is just missing, also the titles notification will be when your offer gets taken, you get a notification. When you're in a trade with another peer, all the important messages like payment started or a deposit transaction confirmed, and when the other peer has confirmed the receipt of the payment, all those messages get sent to the right peer. When you're in a dispute, you get a message for every new dispute message, and you can set up price alerts. So you can say, okay, I want to get a notification when the euro price goes over €6,000, or when it goes below €5,000 or whatever. And you can set up, and that's not completely implemented yet, you can set up market alerts that you say, I'm interested in all the offers which fits to my payment account, like SEPA, as I've set up a SEPA account, and all the offers which I could take with my account, I'm interested in, and I want, but only in that price range, and you define the other offers between 2% or difference from the market price or whatever. And that's not implemented on the UI side. That takes maybe half a day or a day to get this finished on the UI side. domain part is also implemented. And then maybe it needs a little bit of kind of like finishing. So all in all, from my side, when no other developer shows up working on this, it takes me probably 1 or 2 days to get it finished. And yeah, cannot say so much about what's missing on the mobile side, but the iPhone version is in a pretty good state. We asked Pedro for kind of like a review about the design. He started with the style of the redesign, with the green color and the new logo. But as we probably will release it before the redesign, he changed it back to the blue and to the old logo. But besides that, it doesn't really carry the current style of the Bisq application. So it's very minimized and simple and nothing special. From the person, no sophisticated, complicated UI elements, and so we want to keep it as simple as possible.
Cool. Okay, so for the moment, people should basically just hang tight, right? Probably every soon, and then start to get some feedback. Yeah,
I think what would be interested would be then for the next version after the real bidirectional remote version. We would need somebody who is porting the NetLayer library, which is written in Kotlin, to port this to Android. I think Android supports Kotlin, or at least
no, it does for sure.
Yeah. So it probably doesn't need a lot of work. Somebody who is familiar with Android development and a little bit with, I'm not sure if it's needed a lot of experience with Tor or with peer-to-peer systems. And maybe Bernhard, who has written the Kotlin library, maybe he will do it himself, or some colleague or friend of him might be interested to do it. But if any dev is interested to help us here, that would be for sure good work. And the bigger challenge then will be to get this running on iOS as well. If it's too complicated and too much work, we probably will skip iOS. It's also unclear if Apple, the politics of Apple, they have already kicked out again some applications which are supporting ICO projects. And of course, it's always then the definition what's an ICO for Apple and so on. So you are always completely dependent on their bullshit politics. So maybe it's not worth at least to spend a lot of energy and effort in supporting a platform which might kick you out at any time when they think it's not opportune for them. But of course, it would be cool to get it on both platforms. And then the idea is to have really Bisq running behind Tor with Tor hidden services, and you can communicate directly with your Bisq node over Tor hidden services, and you get all the privacy and security features from Tor hidden services, and then you can call the API calls on Bisq. And maybe a quick update with the gRPC API for the DAO. I edited and I implemented a small, simple feature like requesting the balance. So you get the real balance from Bisq, just as a kind of like a demo, and also a client version where you can make these calls. And G, a developer who joined us started to contribute from Bisq a few weeks ago, he might work on this for helping for tests for system and integration tests for the DAO, and to use then and extend the gRPC API, probably starting with what is required for testing the DAO, and then extend it and grow it over time. So my rough plan was to, just as soon as there are some usable features and API calls implemented, to basically publish it, that it's available, and then that it grows over time. It will not be a complete API covering everything, because otherwise it takes half a year of work or whatever. Sure. And then we can scale up, and developers can just pick it up and work on the implementation of a new API call. And
great. Let's call it there. Yeah. So I'll put together show notes and I don't know if I'll do comprehensive links, but I'll do links to the sort of biggest stuff anyway. I'll tweet something about this, and if you're watching this, just give us some feedback. You like the format? Let us know. Let us know what you think. Okay. Thanks, everybody.